Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. And, when I'm recording this episode, we're looking down the barrel of some very interesting economic fallout. Silicon Bank has collapsed. Signature Bank is on the ropes. The world of economy is just kind of doing its little jig, and it's an interesting time to be alive. The old Chinese curse, "May you live in interesting times," is actually coming true. It's a fascinating time to be alive. And I was watching an interview the other day. And some of you have heard me talk about the obstacle is the way. If you encounter an obstacle on the path that you're on, that obstacle belongs there. You wouldn't be running into that obstacle unless it was on the path that you have chosen. So it's part of the path. So the question becomes, how do you use the challenges that you're encountering rather than ruining them? How do you actually turn them to your benefit? And those of us that are entrepreneurs that have started businesses, accessing capital is a big deal. Just kind of how do we do this? So there's and this is my language for this, and this is my take on it. There's a new generation of venture capitalists that are coming on the scene right now. And venture capital itself is actually beginning to change and morph in terms of what it actually makes possible when some things are in place. And I've invited on the show today, Genevieve LeMarchal, to help me kind of illustrate and illuminate some of the stuff that's going on in this VC world. She is the managing partner of Suncoast Ventures, and she's also, and we'll talk about this also, the host of the AdVentureous Podcast. And I want to be sure that we're going to be touching on both of these, but we're going to start off with just kind of a deep dive in, or shallow dive. It depends on where we go here, but we'll take a dive and see what happens when we start opening up the box on what is a VC, why is a VC important, how is it changing, where is it going, all of that sort of stuff. So Genevieve, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. And your introduction, there's so many things to unpack in there. I was like, I could talk about this for hours. Like, I can't wait to dig in. It's going to be so good.
That's why I wanted to have you on the show. Now, just full disclosure, Genevieve was on Office Hours with the show that I do with David Meltzer. And I absolutely, truth be told here, I absolutely fell in love with her. And I mean that very literally. The depth, the approachability, the intelligence, the way that she articulated what she was up to and what was actually kind of in the future. I found myself just falling, head over heels, literally. And I'm not talking about this from a romantic perspective, but in love with what she was talking about. It was engaging, and 15 minutes that we have on that Office Hour show is not enough when something like this happens. And so I wanted to have her on my show here because I wanted to have an opportunity to spend a whole lot more time with her. So Genevieve, again, welcome.
Thank you. Wow. I don't know if I can follow up on that, but I will try.
Yeah.
Give it a shot. Yeah.
The title is The Soul of Business, and you work exclusively with businesses. That's the ocean that you swim in here.
Yep.
When you hear the term the soul of business, what does that bring up for you, and how does it link into what you're doing from a VC perspective with Suncoast Ventures?
One of the things when you were talking about this, I thought of this moment I had in business school way back in the day, like traditional MBA program. I remember just being so intimidated. I was the youngest person in that program. They, interviewed me like 3 times. I walked into the room in my Chuck Taylor sneakers with my Mac, my Mac computer and my bright yellow sweater, and it was just a sea of Dell computer, the corporate issue Dells,
corporate issue Dell.
guys in suits, tall, everyone looked like they rode crew at like Yale. Of course, I immediately just think, I don't belong here. I don't belong here. I don't belong here. Like it's this panic moment, This was, a long time ago, but during that 2 years or whatever business school, I think a light bulb moment went off where I realized the power to change the world is with businesses. And and that occurred to me while in finance class, which is really weird. And I don't know, I can't remember what I might have been looking at numbers wise, but I was like, if businesses thought and acted and operated differently with these resources, what would it be like? And we were studying business models and I was looking at different ways of doing things. And I just kept thinking, if they just did it this way, not only would it not impact the bottom line, but it would create something so incredible for, the people, the environment. And I just didn't understand why it was a trade-off. Why did it have to be that? Because I don't see it that way and I never have. I think the world is just now starting to come to the point where they're realizing it doesn't have to be a trade-off, but that was when I started to realize that if you changed, in your words, the soul of business, that you could change the world and that business was the fastest, most effective way to be able to do it, but you had to be able to change, but that meant that you had to think and act and operate differently.
Yeah.
And so that's I guess where I would say that inception began,
I love that. The idea of business having the power to change the world. Tagline on my email is the future of business is making the future its business. And when we're starting to look at it through that lens, and people have heard me talk about this, that the purpose of business from my perspective is to enhance the possibility of thriving on the planet. And if business is doing that, you're not going to be lacking customers because thriving is what people are attracted to. It's like
it also requires money and profit to thrive. So we're not saying no one should make any money. In fact, we're saying everyone should make it. Everyone should make money, See,
that's where the trade-off fallacy begins to break down. Yes.
And so I think one of the things I wrote about this, I think on Medium, I can't remember if I sent you the article, but maybe I'll do it later. But I was like, the job of an investor is to create abundance. That is our only job. And so if the job is not to hoard, the job is not to go elbows out because you don't create abundance like that. And so I think, starting to realize what is money actually, and kind of getting to the root of that has really changed the way that we think about investing and that we think about amplifying abundance. And it's like the way that I see things being done, not just by VCs in general, but in business is a lack mentality. And I'm like, that doesn't work. You can't do that, and I think that not just the younger generation, but there's a new sort of generation of people of all ages that are starting to realize that. And we have to be brave enough in the face of all these things to step forward and say, there can be another way. And I will find the others who believe this. And I think I'm starting to find them, which makes me feel good.
Honest to God, they are there. They are absolutely there. These other alternative ways, which kind of leads me to, how is Suncoast Venture actually positioned differently than what most people would think of a traditional VC firm being positioned as?
Well, so for one, we're investing in healthcare. So that is, for one, impact. But you could be involved in health and not do impact. You could look at companies and say, oh, look, this is another, innovation that's probably going to make some money for someone. Let's invest in that. Or you can look for things that the world actually needs. And so I think there's two things that have in my opinion, have sort of been major drivers. And everyone's going to say, oh, technology, blah, blah, blah. The health industry is very much a laggard. And so
very much so.
COVID was like an inception or like a singularity event.
Yeah.
Because it changed behaviors of people who didn't want to change behaviors because they were forced to. So clinicians had to change behaviors, hospital systems had to change behaviors. Like it just basically broke down everything almost overnight. And, one example of this is very few people had ever used telehealth.
Yeah.
And then almost overnight, 98% or something of people have used telehealth now. And so there's ramifications to that. But the point is, it rapidly changed behaviors and exposed weaknesses, and it forced a change in an industry. It forced an industry forward. Another thing that it did was it poured money into research and R&D. So even though people were studying a specific virus, the stuff that has come out of this we're just starting to see what's coming out of the research that was happening during this time. It's almost like it made science cool again. All of a sudden, everybody's talking about antibodies and everyone's talking about how vaccines are produced. And it was like this stuff started coming to the forefront of people's minds. So I believe it's created a new renaissance in health. And so not back in the day, but traditionally a VC firm that might invest in this, they did health technology. And then this one did devices. And then this one did therapies and drugs. And then this one did digital health. And everyone did their thing. But then because of this rapid change and mix, the new DNA of a health innovation is all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you slap AI in there, and so it's like, you have to do venture differently in health because health has been forced into a change. And so if you want a different outcome in healthcare, regardless of whether or not you feel like changing the model or not changing the model, you have to change the model for how you engage with these companies.
Yeah.
So that's basically how I would say we've innovated the model, I guess.
Yeah, and and this is one of the things that I was intrigued by. It's a breakdown of silos. Yeah, it's a much more holistic and matrixed approach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so, without divulging any proprietary information here, I'd be interested in what kinds of companies specifically are you interested in supporting?
Yeah, I love to support, of course. So there's certain things that are always going to hold true. Like math is always going to be math, unless I did hear.
Numbers are the numbers.
Yeah, the numbers are going to be the numbers. And so you still have to be able to meet certain conventions. So there are certain companies that will never be venture capital backed companies. That's totally fine. And some that will, and that's totally fine. And there's a way to do it. So with that in place, I like to look at companies that are going to meet the venture model. They are going to have that hockey stick type of growth. It meets what we call the J curve. And that's not like a typical portfolio. It's not like a typical company, and that's fine. But I want it to be, or we want it to be, of course, something the world needs. And so it's got to be a huge market. It's got to be very, very underserved. It has to have, of course, some sort of competitive advantage to be able to serve that market, some interesting angle that's not necessarily the fact that they have some intellectual property. And it's got to help people. If it doesn't help people, if all it's going to do is, if it's an incremental innovation, maybe on something that already exists, that's cool and it might make money. But we're really jazzed by the things that are actually going to impact the world,
health and well-being globally.
And they're going to bring huge returns, because if we don't make great returns in venture capital, then VCs don't get to have subsequent funds. We don't have a job if we don't, so like we have to do both, and so, yeah.
So yeah, the money's important, and I want to kind of come back to that statement. The money is important because I want to demonize what a lot of people hold in their mind about the VC sharks.
Oh
And
yeah. Well, there
that
are
sort
VC
of,
sharks.
oh, I know there are. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've run into them.
Mhm.
I've been bitten.
Yeah. Mhm.
And money is, you talked about, understanding earlier in the interview here, you talked a little bit about understanding what money is.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Lynn Twist is a very good friend of mine. She wrote the book, The Soul of Money. It's a fascinating book. She works with Nobel laureates.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that she talks about is, money is energy. Yeah, that's
Yes.
one way to think about it.
Yes.
It flows. But if, with anything that's energetic, if you try to capture it, if you try to, capture and hold it, energy doesn't lend itself well to being stored
Yeah.
long term. It
Yeah.
wants to move. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I think that you're doing particularly well at Suncoast Ventures is the idea of distribution, being a center of distribution, and money is
Yeah.
absolutely a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you're structuring deals, and this is a very kind of weird oddball question because I think most people would think that they know the answer to this, but how does the use of money come into play, from an energetic perspective when you're working with your the ventures that you're actually funding?
Yeah. Actually, do you know Sebastian Inges?
Yeah,
So you know him in Orange
I know
County.
of him. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So he was on the podcast actually a while ago, and it's so interesting you brought this up because he always posts these little snippets on Instagram or something. I think it's just of him like talking to his staff at his office or something. But he has very insightful leadership, little chunks anyway. So he was talking about how when you're young, like a kid, and you don't have money, but you have time and you have energy and effort. And so if we think of time and energy as currencies, that's just a different type of currency than money, and you allow and you find ways to leverage time and you find ways to leverage energy and efforts that in ways that build wealth, then you start to infill that with actual money, and then it becomes finding ways to leverage money. So I think he was thinking of it more as like an individual who's looking to build their career, right?
Mm-hmm.
We kind of do that in a way with our ecosystem at Suncoast. So if you think of the companies when they come into the ecosystem, they're invited or they kind of apply. It's not just like an open free for all. It's like, hey, do you have like a popsicle stand? Come join us. Don't get me wrong. I love popsicle stands, but like, we're very selective about which companies come in. They start and so if you think of those companies, they're very young. They're oftentimes not yet really ready for venture funding, but they're very promising. And if you think of them as kids, or, we like to sometimes call them baby ducks, like quacking around and, we feed them and and you apply time, resources, and effort strategically into those companies, then you start to apply the money. It's the way that the energy is concentrated into them, and then it flows back. So a lot of founders might say, well, I just want the VC's money because I'm going to build what I'm going to build and I don't need them and I just need your check. And, that's another Black mentality.
Mm-hmm.
I find that founders who tend to be more focused on kind of impact and they want to do stuff in a big way that's going to make really change the industry, they want to partner with their investors.
Yeah.
They understand inherently that investors are conduits. Like it's not a single check one and done. Investors are conduits to capital and conduits to opportunities, just like everyone is, but that's what we specialize in. And so when we can start to figure out who are we the best conduits for, we can do that through the process of applying time and resources. Then we start being conduits for capital and moving them through the system in that way.
Yeah. See, I love this model because it moves it moves the conversation out of a transactional focus and into a relational focus. So, yeah, if I partner with you as a business, my assumption would be that you're going to be with me as a partner through my entire growth cycle. And at some point, there'll be a place where it probably no longer serves either one of us. But there's a partnering aspect to this that isn't just based on.
And that's our hope. And it's not just based on money. Exactly. You totally get it, which is, it's like, and it's so, we're often forced into transactions because at the end of the day, we kind of do have to get like something done, you know, so at a certain point, you have to be like, get the deal done or don't, you know, and as much as I would like, if I had my way, I would just like hang out all day, sitting on a park bench, talking to people, but I can't do that. But I would love to. And so, you know, you have to kind of be like, do you belong in our ecosystem or do you not? Can we help you or can we not? You know, and focus your attention on where you can. But the thing that I think is the most interesting is the process, the relational process. The companies that are involved they almost all receive capital, even if it's not just by virtue of being in the energy swirl, you know? And so that's and so in a lot of ways too, we do spend a lot of effort. I know this is something Charla has to do all the time, kind of trying to herd people back in, because we're like, be in the mix, because this is where the energy there's an energy swirl occurring here and you want this.
You want to be in that. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So that's, it's hard to explain it. And a lot of, you know, traditional like investors would be like, so you have an energy swirl? Like, what?
Everything is energy. I mean, everything is energy. And this is one of the things that I was most attracted to when we had our initial conversation back in office hours, is your recognition and leveraging of this notion that everything is energy. And you put it into a business context that actually is logical, and it's fungible, and it makes sense, and it's executable. So
we're trying.
But hey, based on results, you're doing a pretty good job. We're going to take a real quick break. When we come back, I want to change gears a little bit here. And you've got a podcast that I want to spend some time exploring because number one, I like the title. But number two, it's got some very interesting content that I think our listeners are going to appreciate. So we're going to take a real quick break. Right now, Genevieve LeMarchal is whom I'm speaking with, and we will get back together in just a minute. The nature of life is evidenced in nature. Nature grows, and all of nature honors the desire to be more, to have more, and to do more. Life thrives when it's allowed to grow. And ideally, thriving is what we also, all of us, want to be able to do. Unfortunately, at some stage in life, most people find themselves settling into what I can only call a rut. And a rut is nothing more than a coffin with the ends kicked out. You want to quickly get out of any rut that you find yourself in. When you stop growing, that's when the coffin starts to appear. You know, the simple truth is this, and this is true for everything in nature. You're going to die. I'm going to die. Every one of us dies. So the question we need to come to grips with is not, are we going to die? The question nature asks us to answer is, are we truly living? That's what motivation is about. It's the desire to move. It's the desire to grow and to excel. Have I lived? How have I lived? I'd love for you to take advantage of my Leadership Mindset Masterclass. It's all about providing you with the tools to ensure thriving for yourself and for those around you. Register today to receive the free introduction video and find out more about this acclaimed program. You'll also receive a copy of my international #1 bestseller, Compassionate Capitalism, A Journey to the Soul of Business. I'm Blaine Bartlett, and I look forward to helping you thrive. Welcome back, folks. After that little break, and before we actually went into that little break, I mentioned that I wanted to shift gears here and begin a conversation around Genevieve's podcast, the AdVentureous Podcast. So number one, I mean, this podcast has been running a couple of years now. We're bumping right up, I think, 150 episodes. So podcasts take a fair amount of time and they take a fair amount of work, particularly if you want to do anything with them. So why adventurous? Why is it important to you? What does it make possible for you? And then I want you to also talk about, kind of some of the guests that you're bringing in.
Yeah. Well, so originally AdVentureous was actually a book, and it still is a book. And I was about halfway through, and I don't actually know what happened, but all of a sudden I had a podcast. And I don't actually remember ever actually making a decision being like, it will be a podcast. Like, it was just all of a sudden there was a podcast. And I think kind of part of it was I had too much ants in my pants, and I just like wanted to get the message out, and I wanted to start talking about this stuff. And so, I've always been a writer. Actually, I was a journalist. That was my first career. I studied journalism in school, and I idolized like Edward R. Murrow, Anderson Cooper, all those great broadcasters. And so I wanted to tell stories, and I couldn't wait. I think that might be what happened. But anyway, so I chose adventurous because entrepreneurship is an adventure. So it's adventurous. And I wanted to tell the story of the journey of entrepreneurship because it's a journey of transformation. Yes. So my book was my story. And then I think I got bored with it a little because it was like feeling like a memoir. And I'm like, I don't want to write a memoir. So I'll probably have to rewrite a bunch of it. But then I wanted to do something I was tired of hearing about people being successful. We'll say it that way. Like, I was like, I don't care how much money you made and where you drive now. And like, it felt like the stories that they were sharing with entrepreneurs were so surface. Like, I had this idea, and then I found an investor, and then we grew it, and there were hard moments, but then now we live on an island. And I was like, that's not how it went.
Hey, I live on an island. What can I say?
Yeah, now I have my own like plane, or I was just like, this isn't the real thing. Like, I want the real story because I needed it. I was in the dark, awful mess of, I've like probably had more screw ups and failures than a lot of people, and I would love to actually write about those one day too. But so I wanted to write a book for the people who are in the messy middle. And it turned into a podcast. But to reframe it in mind as it's a journey. It's the obstacle is the way, and it's an adventure. And also I felt like a lot of business things are so dry and boring. And I'm like, I'm going to have a pink neon sign and like do all of my photo shoots on the beach and like make it expansive, and fun. Cause like we need more of that in our life,
So a large part of this was to have fun. Yeah.
I thought it'd be fun.
Yeah.
Well, so like creativity, right? So a lot of, I think business is the ultimate act of creation.
It is.
But I've always been a very creative person. I've always been a writer. If I could go back and like do college over again, I would study art history and be an artist. And I found myself in the day-to-day slog needing a creative outlet. And so writing and podcasting kind of is that for me, Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Now, where can people find the podcast?
It is on all major podcasting channels. I also have a YouTube channel that has the video, so you can actually see the guests and myself on YouTube. The spelling sometimes trips people up because it's adventurous, so it has like a different spelling than just the word adventurous would. So we can link to it. But yeah, AdVentureous Podcast, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, all the things.
All the good ones. I'll have that. Yeah, we'll be sure to have that in the show notes. People can find it. Also, with Suncoast Ventures. Yeah, how can people find out more about
Suncoast? Yeah. Well, so actually there's a couple ways to do it. So you can go to our website, of course, suncoastvc.com. It's a website. That's fine. Where myself, as well as my partners, we're very active on LinkedIn. So if you follow us on LinkedIn, you're going to see our posts. We're often commenting on each other's posts and reposting interesting stuff. So that's one area where we're really active. I'm actually active on Instagram. I do talk about venture capital in a sort of a more general way on my Instagram stories, just kind of because sometimes I find it fun. And, a lot of, friends and people like that do like watch them and learn something. But yeah, I would say LinkedIn, and you can also check out Instagram.
Instagram, great.
Yeah.
Folks, we've been listening to Genevieve LeMarchal. And Genevieve, hey, fun is one of the things that I pay a lot of attention to in my life. For the reasons I live on an island. It's fun.
Oh, you actually do live on an island?
I do live on an island.
Oh, yeah. I was like joking. I was like, oh, we're on an island.
Yeah. Now I got 11 acres on the water here, just looking out at the ocean. And
well, nice.
It's fun. It's fun.
But you're also willing to tell people the real story.
The real story
of what it took to get there.
A long time to get here.
Yes.
It really did. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And there were times where I didn't have money for gas.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And like I often will tell founders when I talk to them, I'll tell them that anything that they've screwed up or messed up, or I've done it and probably worse. And I've been in that situation and probably worse. And so I'm like, you can't shock me, because I've already done what you've done, yeah. Like if you failed at something, I did it too. So like, let's just fix it, And
that's the idea of adventurous. I mean, failure, only happens when you stop moving. So, you just keep it moving, and that's where the energy comes in. Genevieve, thank you so much for a fascinating interview. I've really enjoyed this. So, folks, check out the websites. They'll be in the show notes. And until next time, I want you to find a way in your life to become a center of distribution, not a center of accumulation. You're going to find that your life works a whole lot better when you're giving stuff away.
In the flow.
In the flow. In the flow. And we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.